All right, so this week's talk, we wanted to focus on kind of defining or understanding where the science meets the art with strength and conditioning, but also I think just more in a broader sense, kind of coaching in general. This is something that has been used to describe the coaching world for a very long time, where we have the people that are very data driven, very heavy on the science and the technical side, and they do everything by the research and by the books, and then the other side being more of the nuance, intuition, and kind of just having a certain feel for things. I think all of us are kind of on the same page, and I believe, as most should be, there's a demand and a balance for both, right? And in order for you to be truly effective, or dare I say good at your job, you have to not only have a balance, but know how that balance is applied and in which situations you emphasize either the art versus the science. But should be an interesting talk, and really just kind of wanted to open up some different points of view on how this is kind of perceived and then applied in really 3 different realms of performance training. So with all that, Jeremy, what comes to mind for you with the art and the science balance?
I think the first thing that comes to mind is just literally when I think of those 2 words, like when I started, coming out of undergrad, I was so worried about am I going to know the science really well, just to impress whoever employers I'm going to work for. But then, zooming past the present day, it's I kind of almost rely as well on the art, but then that comes with the experience, just because you get thrown into these situations where you don't know what the fuck to do sometimes. You kind of rely on instinct, you kind of rely on what you know. You rely on the foundational things of whatever aspect you're doing. And then you kind of just go from there. So a lot of times I'm just if I'm not too sure, I kind of go back and say, okay, I know X, Y, Z, but then let's try this because, this might work out. But then it's all in good taste. Obviously it's not, going to be let's just do it just to do it. But that's what comes to mind when I think of art and science and blending.
Yeah. So I guess kind of 2 things that kind of perked my thought while you were talking is I knew nothing when I first started personal training. I took my ACE certification and answered the questions that they wanted me to answer, and there I went. I had no idea what the fuck I was doing. And it was pretty evident to those around me that knew what they were doing. So I relied heavily on the art of coaching itself and used my personality and my connection and my communication with people to help me kind of get started as I started to pick up more of the scientific foundations along the way. And now I feel like I have a good balance of both within there. So I kind of used art as forming relationships with my clients and things like that to help me get my foot, in the door. Now I kind of look at it, I kind of always envision a puzzle piece almost. So whenever, I have an athlete that comes in and, maybe there's one of their, acute chronic injuries is bothering them for the day, or maybe they, did something, tweak something, outside of the gym, and then they came in and, about it. So I'm trying to figure out, all right, what did we have programmed today? What do we need to adjust? What should we adjust? What can we kind of, modify and things like that? And I start looking at, different movements based on what they're feeling and how, if certain positions are bothering them, and kind of putting different puzzle pieces together to allow us to have a good training session still, despite whatever might be going on.
So it's interesting because you had basically the conventional academic, straight through college experience. You had a dance major, and really it was just a part-time gig for you to make some money for a little while.
Yeah.
And then I kind of fall somewhere in between, where I kind of had the academic experience until I got failed out, and then basically had to self-teach. And I always attribute the same story, but I was born through YouTube, right? Kirksey and DeFranco and all those guys. So it's interesting how just the formative years kind of set the tone, or almost the trajectory for what certain coaches are going to be inclined to. I think kind of looking at it now, my perspective is that you have to know the foundations for obvious reasons, but primarily because if you don't understand the foundations, anything you put on top of that is developed through inaccurate roots.
Yeah.
Right.
So, and this is where we get into the Instagram what the fuck is Fits Pro or whatever, these idiots, and even coaches that mean well and look like they know well, even them being somewhat misinformed. But once you know the foundational piece, then it begins it starts to become this process of understanding the nuance of the practice or of the application. And you alluded to it at the beginning, but the denser that you get on the foundational side, the quicker you can become with developing and adapting nuance.
Yeah, for sure.
You understand the inner workings at a higher level, the nuance begins to kind of create itself in some cases, you know?
Yeah. And I guess let me like take back my statement earlier. So I guess on the athletic training side, I was very science first, fuck the art, because no one cares about that. But then when we all started at Globo Gym, again, I was in the same boat as you, Nicole. I knew nothing about personal training, but I didn't realize that at the time. I'm like, oh yeah, ATC, I can personal train. It's not that. So I relied on the art, and I had no science of foundations of like just exercise or how to program. My thing, like bodybuilding.com, chest on Monday, back on Tuesday, shoulders on Wednesday. So I think now those two roles have flipped, where it's like with the athletic training and the like PT side and rehab side, it's like, you know, more of the art and stuff like that, where now it's like where I relied on like my customer service voice and just trying to woo clients. It's like, okay, I know some foundational pieces of why we're doing, you know, energy systems development, plyometrics, etc. So yeah, they're kind of like crisscross flipped over now. Yeah. But then again, now I have this foundational stuff on both ends, and then the art is coming along.
Yeah, I think it's important to understand that had you and I not really taken that time to get a strong foundational base, we would have never left Globo Gym or been able to, and really, you know, been put in the positions that we are now with the companies that we're with now. So I think that, you know, further employs the importance of like learning those foundations before you go into the more nuanced style.
Yeah. Like, and it's funny because I almost feel like I'm copping out, not only with this answer, but with all of these like kind of frequently discussed, you know, topics or whatever, but I fall in the middle, right? Like I'll put it this way. If you have somebody who is 100% hell-bent on, oh, I don't give a shit, but there's no art side, there's no nuance, you just do the technical foundations over and over, like, you're wrong. Yeah. Person on the opposite side, it's like, yeah, foundations are bullshit. I can kind of, you know, make my way through this just off of my gut. Like, you're full of shit too. So I think that the variable that gets ignored a lot is what's the population, and then to what extent in their training or you know, development are they? Because the foundational piece, if you work with young athletes, high school athletes, low-level college athletes, like 80% of the shit that they need is foundational. Right. Just overload and adapt, because you're trying to build into or reach their genetic potential. Right. Once you get on the other end of that, and it's late college, professional, or even just adults, you know, once they've developed fully, you can only get so much out of the foundational shit because that adaptation is pretty much run dry. You're not going to get anything more out of it that's going to give any valuable or redeemable return. So that's when you have to start to apply nuance and then identify weaknesses that aren't as common or as, you know, broadly defined as we know it to be in the earlier years. Right. So that's where I think there's a massive disconnect, because a lot of what I use is nuanced and is, you know, unconventional or whatever. But the thing is like, when you have high-level athletes that have extremely dense, complex injury histories, that have extreme demands and requirements for their duty or sport, and they're basically genetically capped, like, what are you supposed to do?
Well, I think that goes back to, you have to have a scientist and an engineering brain.
There you go.
Like, for everyone who has like, oh, literature says this works and this doesn't. Well, it only works for that time being until it's disproved, and then something else will work. And that will
with that population.
With that population.
Yeah.
Exactly. So having to reverse engineer stuff, again, understanding like super fundamentals, even on like a molecular level, you have to kind of go backwards and then like deconstruct stuff when you're stuck. I mean, it's hard for me to say. I do that a lot because I get just stuck in a rut like all the fucking time. But it's like, that's what helps me. And then I think as the years go on, with the art side of it, I think Tim's probably helped me out the most indirectly with this, but having just like a philosopher's brain, and like, and I know you probably, you know, tell me stories about that, but it's like having like that kind of lens, you know, why do this when you could do this? Or like the whole like omelet fucking story that still blows my mind today. Just having those two blend, because you're getting, you know, the best of like those peaks of like the scientist, philosopher, you know.
So I think another thing to note on this too is like, everybody has their own temperament and idiosyncrasies. So I don't think it's as much of this like mixed bag blind reach. Okay, more art or, you know, whatever, more science.
Yeah.
I think you need to understand who you are as a person and what your typical demeanor is and what your development consists of, so that you can really play the authentic roles that are needed. You do need to be flexible in that you need to have some artistic side and you need to have some scientific side, but you can kind of emphasize or lead with one versus the other based on who you are naturally. It would look weird if I approached people or tried to present myself as like this artsy based coach. It would just be fucking weird. I'm obviously very binary. I'm obviously very technical, but I've worked, you know, very hard on kind of being more malleable with my personality, the way in which I communicate with people, the frequency at which I cue or I give people feedback on things, you know, and that's one that's very big with our population, because if you overload somebody with cueing or try to give these illustrious, detailed metaphors, they're going to get pissed off. Like, dude, just tell me to flex my hip when I get, you know, into my step up position. Like, then there are other people where if you say, you know, hey man, your elbow needs to get into full external rotation and make sure that you're not deviating at the wrist when you're going in, then they're just going to look at you like, I don't understand what you're talking about.
Right.
So rather than being a technical or an art savvy coach, you just need to be able to, like you were saying, like you need to be able to reach into both bags and then apply whatever's needed in the moment. I know that's true for you especially on competition days.
Oh yeah, it's 100%.
So that you want to talk about a nuance versus a science. I mean, competition day is literally the definition of that.
The mental aspect, knowing which athletes need a little bit more and which ones just need you to load the bar, count and keep it pushing and tell them when to hit the weight, you know, knowing, you know, too many cues before they get on the platform. So they're thinking about 50 billion things. Like that's never a good idea. And we see it, you know, all the time. It means, you know, coaches are rattling off everything that the lifter needs to remember. And I'm like, go fucking lift the bar. Like you did it all. But like,
we're here now. Yeah, we're here.
So, you know,
but still all at the same time though, having all of the numbers in your head, knowing what to do when there's a weight switch, knowing what to do when the timeline gets jammed up. Like, well, actually I would say that's probably more on the nuance side, but on the technical side, like if you don't have the right warm-up script, if you don't have the right weight set, then you can be as nuanced and savvy and communicating and blah, blah, blah in the back on meet day. But if your fucking numbers are wrong, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So, and that's what I always counter people with, because I always hear they don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. Well, I don't know. I'd kind of rather my dentist just be able to perform a root canal rather than asking me about how my fucking weekend was.
Yeah. I mean, to that point, like, I don't want to sound like cocky, but I feel like, you know, we're in constant evolution of how we think, how we understand information, how we like intake it. But I don't think one could really start relying on the art until they really know the science. Like they have no right to try and get. That's
a major problem. And that's where old coaches get all bent out of shape and butthurt, you know, on social media about it. But the young coaches are in the wrong on it, where they try to develop these, you know, really wild or bizarre reaching type of, you know, nuanced applications.
Yeah,
that's just you being premature.
Right.
If it's balanced correctly and it's kind of you know, progressed into, so to speak, throughout your development as a coach, that's the critical aspect to this. Like that, it has to occur in due time. And we've all, I'm the first one to point blame to. We all go through the phases where we overreach. Right? We just come up with shit that just does not apply. It's just really dumb, and that's okay. And you know, one of the points that I jotted out for tonight is like, this is very much a calculated trial and error.
Right. Yeah.
The more that we know, the more technically proficient that you are, the broader your risk taking can become, because it's really more calculated. So it seems like it's more of a reach, but it's actually more precise. You know,
because we're just constantly evolving with the science. I mean, like with my, I guess, population now. So being from the college setting, it's like I used to love the whole philosophy shit before I would even warm up my guys in the weight room. I would start out with like some personal fucking story to kind of relate to the guys, and then switching here now to the population I'm working with, they're like, I don't fucking care, dude. Just
what do I need?
Yeah, it's like, okay, yes sir.
I can play all day, you know. But it's like, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, like with that, it's like it's made me a better technical coach, because I do now really explain to these guys and girls like why this is happening and why you need to do this, rather than like, dude, just trust me, or else I'll tell the head coach. Just so.
One of the things that I heard from Mike Boyle, like very early on, I think my first Perform Better, that really struck me and it's stuck with me ever since. If your athletes suck, you suck.
Yeah.
Period.
For sure.
Right. So we can talk about science versus nuance and all these different techniques and programming schemes and everything like that, whatever. But if your athletes suck, you suck.
Yeah.
So again, it's just a constant reminder for me where I'm not this way or that way. I'm the way that's needed. What is the outcome? We are outcome driven, not process driven. As the coach, you have to be the one willing to bend and be malleable. You have to be flexible to situations. You have to be calm under stressful situations.
Right.
Those are your fundamental duties. So you don't give a shit about comfort or the process or whatever. You're just there to achieve an outcome. Your comfortability will be there in due time, but you need to stay focused on what's going to be best for the outcome of the situation.
Right. And I don't know like how this may pertain to things. It's just popping in my mind now, but just as a coach or someone just working with people, just know how to read a room.
Yeah. Oh my God. Yes.
Yep.
And as I can't say that.
And your athletes, you have to know how to read your athletes. You have to know when to dial back a little bit and let them be, and when, they need a little bit more of, guidance, cueing, just motivation, whatever it might be, but being able to read your athletes.
I can't believe I'm just now thinking of this, but here's the ultimate pinnacle: art versus science, right? Athlete readiness. Go find one of those threads on Twitter.
Yeah.
Right? Is it the software and the data tracking, or the bio readouts and all these different things now? You have that crowd, and then you have that other crowd that's, well, I just need to shake their hand and look them in the eye, and I'll know all I need to know. Like, it's that's my athletes by how they walk into the like. So here, how's this? Right? Here's what I do. I get 3 omega wave readings a week, and I ask them how they feel 5 days a week.
Yeah. Well, no, I remember like a couple of years ago. I don't know if you remember this, Danny. I like text you. I'm like, hey, what do you do to kind of like get these objective readings with your guys? And like, I just remember you texting me. I don't know. I just fucking asked them. Like, if they're ready to... Yes.
But and omega wave is an unbelievable software. It's incredibly dense and sophisticated. It's phenomenal. It will never override our conversation.
Yeah.
Right.
Ever. It will never determine singularly what we're going to do. I look at the objective piece as the insurance, right? It's almost like my safety net, where when I go through the report, if it's like everything's in the red, stress is through the roof, tension's through the roof, and we'll probably move our high CNS full day.
Yeah.
But like it's not a situation where I'm like, oh, well, the omega wave says that we can't do anything other than diaphragmatic breathe today, so go ahead and hop down. Like, why can't we just strike a balance on relying on some technical or some software pieces to help guide the ship, but then just be a human and intuitive?
Well, I think that lends like the importance of this, and it may be a lost art to some, even coaching, but like the importance of just conversation and the importance of just observation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
So simple, man.
the only omega wave you'll need if you don't have one.